The sound of champagne glasses clinking together echoed through the hall as I stood outside, my hand pressed against the cold glass of the window, watching my only daughter walk down the aisle, the daughter I had raised alone for 23 years, the daughter whose wedding dress had cost me $3,879 plus alterations, the daughter who hadn't invited me to her own wedding. I could see my sister Margaret laughing with my niece, both dressed in dusty rose gowns that I'd paid for just 3 weeks. Earlier, the flowers, white peonies, and blush roses that cost $4,350 were exactly as I'd selected with the florist. Everything was perfect, except I wasn't supposed to be there. My own family had conspired to keep me away, thinking I'd be in Boston on a business trip. They never expected me to be standing outside the venue in my tailored navy pantsuit, watching the ceremony I had financed down to the last sugar flower on the $1,200 cake. They never expected the waiter who just locked eyes with me through the window, the one who'd helped me document every penny I'd spent on my ungrateful family's perfect day. I never thought I'd be the kind of mother who wasn't welcome at her daughter's wedding. Isn't that strange? You spend decades thinking you know where you stand in your family, and then one day you discover you've been standing on quicksand the whole time. When Katie was born on March 12, 1998, her father had already left us. It was just me and my red-faced, squalling baby girl. Against the world, I was 37 years old, had $842 in my checking account, and a determination that this child would have everything I never had. I still remember the smell of the hospital's harsh detergent on the sheets, mixed with that indescribable newborn scent as I held her against my chest and whispered, "It's you and me, Catagirl." Forever I built my business while raising Catty alone. 5 years of working until 2 a.m., after putting her to bed, 17 business loans, and a schedule. That had me dropping her at my sister's house more often than I'd like to admit. Margaret was always there, always helpful, always hinting that my career was taking precedence over motherhood. "Children need stability, Eleanor," she'd say, her voice sweet as honey but with that pinch of judgment that made my shoulders tense. By the time Katie was 10, my financial consulting firm had 37 employees and had just landed our first $1 million client. I bought a 4-bedroom colonial in the best school district and started a college fund that would grow to $232,000 by her senior year. I had made it. We had made it, or so I thought. Katie was always closer to her Aunt Margaret than to me. How could she not be? Margaret was there for the afternoon cookies and homework help while I was negotiating contracts. Margaret attended every soccer game while I made it to 1 and 3, always arriving breathless and apologetic. Margaret had 4 children of her own, a husband who coached Little League, and a camera roll full of family Christmas photos where everyone wore matching pajamas. I had business awards, a corner office, and enough money to make sure Katie never wanted for anything. "Mom, you don't have to buy me everything," Katie would say as a teenager when I'd come home with another peace offering from a business trip. "I just want you to be here." I should have listened more carefully to what she was really saying. I'll tell you exactly when things started to unravel, because I've replayed that day in my mind 1,000 times. It was December 18, 2021, a Saturday morning dusted with the first snow of the season. Katie had called the night before, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Mom, can you come for brunch tomorrow? I have news." I arrived at her apartment at 11:07 a.m. with a bottle of champagne tucked under my arm. When she opened the door, a tall young man with kind eyes stood beside her. "Mom, this is James," she said, her eyes shining. I noticed the ring immediately, a princess cut diamond that caught the light from her Christmas tree. "We're engaged." They'd been dating for 2 years, she explained. 2 years, and I'd met him exactly twice. That's when I realized how little I really knew about my daughter's life. "Mrs. Bennet, it's great to see you again," James said, extending his hand. His palm was warm and slightly calloused, an honest hand. I thought, "Katie talks about you all the time." I wondered what exactly Katie had told him about me as I forced a smile and uncorked the champagne. We toasted their future, and Katie started bubbling about wedding ideas. "Aunt Margaret already has a Pinterest board started. She thinks June would be perfect, and Uncle Dave knows the manager at the Lakeview Resort." My smile froze. "You've already talked to Margaret about this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Katie nodded enthusiastically. "We had dinner with them last night to tell them first. I would have invited But I know how busy you are with the Henderson account. The champagne suddenly tasted bitter. First, that word echoed in my head as I sat there, learning that I was an afterthought in what should have been one of the most important moments of my daughter's life. I pushed the hurt aside and did what I always do. I offered to help, the only way I knew how. Katie, I want to pay for the wedding, I said. Whatever you want, it's yours. This is your special day. James started to protest. Something about managing on their own, but Katie's eyes lit up. Really, Mom, you mean it? I nodded, relieved to see her looking at me with that childhood admiration I'd missed for so long. Of course. Just let me know what you need. That was my first mistake, thinking I could buy my way back into my daughter's heart. But it wasn't my last. Over the next 6 months, I wrote check after check. $15,000 for the venue deposit, $7,500 for the photographer, $4,200 for the DJ and live string quartet. For the ceremony, Katie and Margaret selected everything together, sending me links or calling with amounts needed. I was included in exactly 3 planning meetings, during which Margaret dominated the conversation while Katie nodded along. Eleanor, don't you think the silver chargers would be too cold? Katie wants a warm, intimate feeling, Margaret would say, not actually waiting for my response. I have the text messages saved, 243 of them mostly about money or logistics. Not once did Katie ask for my opinion on her dress, her flowers, or her vows. But each time I felt that familiar stab of exclusion, I pushed it down and wrote another check. On April 3rd, Margaret called to discuss the rehearsal dinner. James's parents want to host it at Milano's, but it's so expensive, she sighed. They can only afford to invite the wedding party and immediate family. I wasn't a part of the wedding party. Katie had chosen her cousins and college friends as bridesmaids. I'm immediate family. I reminded her. There was a pause, a fraction too long. Of course you are, Eleanor. I'll make sure you're on the list. Something in her voice made my stomach tighten. I should have pressed harder, asked more questions. Instead, I offered to contribute to the rehearsal dinner so more people could be included. Another $3,800, transferred directly to James's father's account. I have the receipt, dated April 5, 2022. The wedding was set for June 25, just 8 weeks away. I had already spent $42,693 on my daughter's special day, and I hadn't even bought my mother of a bride dress yet. Every time I brought it up with Katie, she was vague. Oh, wear whatever you're comfortable in, Mom. Maybe navy or silver. But she never suggested shopping together, never sent pictures of dresses she thought would suit me. Meanwhile, my credit card statement showed a charge of $897 from Elegant Evening Wear, a dress for Margaret. I later discovered, a dress Katie had helped her pick out. If you're wondering when I finally realized something was truly wrong, I'll tell you exactly. May 17th, 6:22 p.m. I stopped by Katie's apartment, unannounced, with swatches for the table, linens, the one decision she'd said I could help with. When I knocked, I heard laughter inside, then hushed voices. Katie opened the door just wide enough to see me, her cheeks flushed. Mom, I wasn't expecting you. Behind her, I glimpsed Margaret and 2 of Katie's bridesmaids sitting around the dining table, scattered with what looked like seating arrangement cards. I brought the swatches, I said, holding up the fabric samples. Is this a bad time? Katie stepped into the hallway, pulling the door mostly closed behind her. Actually, we're just figuring out some last-minute details. Can I call you tomorrow? The door wasn't completely shut, and I heard Margaret's voice drift out. Just tell her, we're all set with the linens. Amy's mother found a better price anyway. I felt something crack inside me, a tiny fracture in the foundation of my relationship with my daughter. Katie, I said quietly, why don't you want me involved in your wedding planning? Her eyes darted away, then back to me. That's not true, Mom. You're paying for everything, and I'm so grateful. It's just, she hesitated, twisting her engagement ring. Aunt Margaret knows more about this stuff. She's done 4 weddings for her kids, and you're so busy with work. I didn't want to bother you with the small details. Small details, like choosing the flowers, the music, the food, that would celebrate my only child's marriage. Like being included in the planning sessions happening right behind that door. I swallowed hard. I see. Well, I won't keep you. Have fun with your aunt. I turned to leave, then stopped. Katie, is there something else going on? Because sometimes I feel like the door opened wider, and Margaret appeared, her arms sliding around Katie's shoulders. "Eleanor, what a nice surprise. We were just wrapping up here. Did you need something?" The protective way she held my daughter, the slight dismissal in her tonette cut deeper than any knife. "Actually, I wanted to talk about the mother-daughter dance," I said, grasping at one tradition I assumed was still sacred. Katie and Margaret exchanged a glance I couldn't interpret. "About that," Katie began, her voice unnaturally high. "James and I were thinking of skipping some of the traditional elements to keep things moving, you know." I stood there, clutching my fabric swatches, as Margaret nodded encouragingly at my daughter. "We're doing a father-daughter dance with Uncle Dave since, well, Dad isn't around. But we thought instead of a mother-daughter dance, we'd do a special toast from the people who raised me. People, plural. As if I hadn't been the one working myself to exhaustion to give her everything. As if I hadn't been her mother for 23 years. I felt my hand begin to shake, and I shoved the swatches into my purse. "I understand," I said, though I didn't. "Not really. I'll let you get back to your planning." I made it all the way to my car before the tears came. Sitting in the parking lot of my daughter's apartment complex, I finally allowed myself to face the truth I'd been avoiding. My daughter didn't want me at her wedding. She wanted my money, but not me. The realization was like swallowing broken glass. I called my assistant, Barbara, from the car. "Cancel my meetings tomorrow," I said, my voice rough with tears. "I need a personal day." Barbara has been with me for 15 years. She knew something was wrong, but she didn't pry. "Of course, Eleanor, is there anything else you need?" I almost said no, but then changed my mind. "Yes, find me the name of the event coordinator at the Lakeview Resort. I need to have a conversation about my daughter's wedding." The next morning, I met with Thomas Jenkins, the events manager at Lakeview. I'd only spoken with him once before, when I called to pay the venue deposit. "Mrs. Bennett, what can I do for you today?" he asked as we sat in his office overlooking the lake. I took a deep breath and placed my checkbook on the table between us. "I'm paying for my daughter's wedding, but I have concerns about the guest list." He nodded sympathetically. "That's quite common, actually. Families often disagree about who should be invited." I leaned forward. "Mr. Jenkins, I need to know if I'm on that list." His confusion was immediate. "You're not sure if you're invited to your daughter's wedding?" I nodded, shame burning my cheeks. "I have reason to believe I might not be." He frowned, then tapped at his computer. "Let me pull up the final guest list that was submitted last week." My hands trembled as he scrolled through the document, his expression carefully neutral. Finally, he looked up. "Mrs. Bennett, I don't see your name on this list. There's a Margaret and David Taylor listed as mother and father of the bride." The room seemed to tilt sideways. I gripped the edge of his desk. "That's not possible," I whispered. "I'm her mother. I'm paying for this entire wedding." Thomas's face softened with genuine concern. "I'm very sorry, Mrs. Bennett. Would you like me to print the list for you?" I nodded, numb with shock. When he handed me the paper, I scanned it twice, 3 times, looking for my name. It wasn't there. Margaret and David were listed as parents of the bride. My brother-in-law was going to walk my daughter down the aisle. My sister had taken my place, with my daughter's full cooperation. I folded the paper carefully and put it in my purse. "Mr. Jenkins, I have a rather unusual request." Something in my voice must have communicated my determination, because he leaned forward attentively. "I've spent nearly $50,000 on this wedding so far. I have receipts for everything. I'd like to speak with your waitstaff." His eyebrows rose. "Our waitstaff? May I ask why?" I met his gaze steadily. "Because I'm going to need witnesses when the truth comes out." I didn't confront Katie or Margaret immediately. Instead, I began gathering evidence: bank statements, credit card receipts, Venmo transfers, text messages requesting funds. I created a spreadsheet documenting every penny I had contributed: $3,879 for the wedding dress, $4,350 for flowers, $15,000 for the venue, $7,500 for the photographer, $4,200 for music, $6,500 for catering, $1,200 for the cake, $3,800 for the rehearsal dinner. The total came to $47,429, and we were still weeks away from the wedding. I printed everything, organized it chronologically in a leather portfolio, and made 3 copies. Then I did something I'd never done before. I took 2 weeks off work. My executive team was shocked. I hadn't taken more than 3 consecutive days off in 15 years. Eleanor, are you ill? Maiku asked, genuine concern in his voice. No, Richard, I replied. I just need to focus on my daughter's wedding. It wasn't exactly a lie. I spent those 2 weeks meeting quietly with the vendors my money had paid for, the florist, the caterer, the photographer, the DJ. I didn't ask them to do anything unethical, just to be honest if questions arose about who had financed the event. Most were sympathetic once I explained the situation. The wedding coordinator at the venue, a woman named Diane with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, was particularly supportive. I've been doing this for 22 years, she told me over coffee in the resort's restaurant. I've seen every family drama imaginable, but this. She shook her head, examining the documents I'd shown her. This isn't right, Mrs. Bennett. She tapped a manicured finger on the seating chart where Margaret and David were positioned at the parents' table. Have you confronted your daughter about this? I shook my head. Not yet. I wanted to understand the full picture first. Diane nodded thoughtfully. The bride and groom have a final walkthrough scheduled for June 18th. Your sister and brother-in-law will be there. She hesitated, then added, if you'd like to be present, I could arrange it. I considered her offer, imagining the confrontation, the shock on Margaret's face, Katie's excuses, the scene it would cause. No, I decided. I don't want to ruin my daughter's wedding. I just want. What did I want? Recognition, appreciation, love. I just want the truth to be acknowledged, I finally said. Diane studied me for a moment, then reached for her phone. Let me introduce you to Michael. He's our head waiter and has been with us for 15 years. If anyone can help navigate a delicate situation with discretion, it's him. Michael was in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair and the observant eyes of someone who has served the wealthy and entitled for decades without being noticed. We met in the empty ballroom where my daughter would soon celebrate her marriage without me. Mrs. Bennett, he said, his voice low and respectful as I explained my situation. I understand completely. My own mother wasn't invited to my sister's wedding. Family can be complicated. There was genuine empathy in his expression. What would you like to happen on the day? I showed him my documentation, explained that all I wanted was acknowledgement of my contribution, not a scene, not a confrontation, just the truth. Can you help me? I asked. His smile was slight but determined. Leave it to me and my team. We'll make sure credit is given where it's due. I spent the next week preparing for every possibility. I bought a navy pantsuit that cost $1,250 more than I'd ever spent on a single outfit. Tin case, I needed to appear dignified at a moment's notice. I rehearsed what I would say to Katie if confronted, practicing in front of my bathroom mirror until I could deliver my words without crying. I even met with my attorney to understand my rights regarding the money I'd spent. You could potentially sue for fraud, he advised, but do you really want to take your daughter to court? The question hung between us, and I shook my head. No, Roger. I just want her to face what she's done. On June 19th, 6 days before the wedding, I received a text from Katie. Mom, can you transfer $3,200 for the videographer? Last-minute addition, but Margaret says it's worth it. Thanks. No mention of my role in the wedding. No invitation to the rehearsal dinner that was now just days away. Just another request for money. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I called Michael at the resort. Has there been a videographer added to the vendor list? I asked. He checked and confirmed there had been. Booked and confirmed yesterday. The deposit was made on a credit card belonging to Margaret Taylor, but the balance is pending. I thanked him and hung up, staring at Katie's text. Then, I made a decision. I'll take care of it directly. I texted back. Send me the videographer's details. Katie replied. Immediately, with the information, adding a heart emoji, the first sign of affection she'd shown in weeks. I contacted the videographer myself, a young woman named Alicia, with an impressive portfolio. I understand you're filming my daughter's wedding, I said when she answered. I'm Eleanor Bennett, the mother of the bride. There was a pause. Oh, I was told the mother of the bride was Margaret Taylor. My heart constricted, but I kept my voice steady. That's my sister. There seems to be some confusion. I'm Katie's biological mother, and I'm paying for your services. I paid the $3,200 in full, then added, Alicia, I'd like to make a special request. The day before the wedding, I still hadn't received any information about the ceremony or reception. No schedule, no confirmation of my roller, if I even had one. I finally broke down and called Katie directly. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail trying to sound casual. Hi, sweetie. Just checking in about tomorrow. What time should I arrive? Love you. An hour later, my phone rang, but it wasn't Katie. It was Margaret. Eleanor, she began, her voice dripping with false concern. Katie's so busy with last-minute details. She asked me to call you back. I gripped the phone tighter. Margaret, I need to know what time to be at the venue tomorrow. There was a pause, and I could almost see her calculating expression. Well, actually, there's been a small change of plans. The ceremony is now family only, very intimate. And since you've been so generous financially, we all agreed you wouldn't want to be bothered with the stress of the day itself. I sat down, my legs suddenly unable to support me. What are you saying, Margaret? My voice was barely a whisper. I'm saying, she continued, sounding irritatingly patient, that Katie feels your relationship has always been more financial than emotional. She appreciates everything you've done to support her, but she wants to be surrounded by people who've been consistently present in her life. The accusation was so blatant, so cruel, that for a moment I couldn't breathe. That's not true, I finally managed. I worked to give her everything. Margaret cut me off. Yes, you worked. That's the point, Eleanor. You were always working while I was raising your daughter, who helped her with homework, who attended her recitals, who taught her to drive. It wasn't you. Each question was a dagger. So now she wants Uncle Dave to walk her down the aisle, and me to help her into her dress. The dress you paid for, of course. We're all very grateful for your contribution. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, a living wound in my chest, but alongside it rose a cold, clear anger. I see, I said, my voice calmer than I felt. And does Katie share these feelings, or are these your words? Margaret, my sister's laugh was dismissive. Why don't you ask her yourself? Oh wait, she's not taking your calls, is she? Before I could respond, she added, look, Eleanor, why don't you take that business trip to Boston? You mentioned, Katie said, you have a big client meeting on Monday anyway. We'll send pictures, I promise. The call ended, and I sat in silence, holding my phone like it might explode. My daughter didn't want me at her wedding. My sister had orchestrated the entire betrayal. And tomorrow, they would celebrate as a family while I was expected to disappear. I called Michael immediately. It's happening, I told him, my voice shaking. They're trying to keep me away from the wedding. His response was calm, reassuring. Mrs. Bennett, everything is in place. The staff has been briefed. All vendor payments have been verified. If you choose to attend, we'll ensure you're treated with the respect you deserve. I closed my eyes, visualizing the scene walking into my daughter's wedding uninvited, creating a spectacle that would ruin her day. Could I do that to her, despite everything? I don't know if I can face them, I admitted. Michael was silent for a moment. May I make a suggestion? He finally said. Come to the venue early tomorrow. You can watch from a private area we've prepared. You don't have to make a decision until you're ready. It seemed like a reasonable compromise. Thank you, Michael. I'll be there at noon. That night was the longest of my life. I lay awake, replaying every moment of Katie's childhood, searching for where I had gone so wrong. Yes, I had worked long hours. Yes, Margaret had been present for moments I'd missed, but I had been there too for fevers at 3 a.m., for nightmares and first days of school, for college tours and graduation. I had loved her fiercely, completely, even if I hadn't shown it the way Margaret did. As dawn broke, I made my decision. I would go to the wedding, not to cause a scene, but to witness the event I had made possible. To see my daughter become a bride, even if she didn't want me there. I deserved that much. I arrived at Lakeview Resort at exactly noon, 6 hours before the ceremony. Michael met me at a side entrance, dressed in his formal uniform. Mrs. Bennett, he greeted me with a respectful nod. We've prepared a room for you with a view of the ceremony and reception. Spaces. He led me through service corridors to a small office with large windows, overlooking the garden where white chairs were being arranged in neat rows. You'll be able to see everything from here, he explained, showing me how the blinds could be adjusted for privacy. I've taken the liberty of arranging a light lunch and champagne. On a small table sat an elegant tray with sandwiches, fruit, and a bottle of Veuve Clicquot, the same champagne that will be served at the reception, he added with a knowing smile. After all, you selected it. As the hours passed, I watched the venue transform. Florists arranged the peonies and roses I had chosen. The string quartet set up their instruments. Guests began to arrive, elegantly dressed, smiling, unaware of the drama unfolding behind the scenes. At 4:30 p.m., I saw Margaret arrive with her husband and children. She wore the dusty rose dress I had inadvertently paid for, looking every inch the mother of the bride. My brother-in-law Dave carried a garment bag that must have contained his tuxedo. They were escorted inside, laughing together, a perfect family picture. I pressed my hand against the cool glass, fighting back tears. At 5:15 p.m., a bridal car arrived. My heart lurched as I saw Katie step out, radiant in a garment bag that must have contained the dress I'd bought. James's mother helped her from the car, handling her with care, while his father clapped the groom on the back. They were surrounded by bridesmaids in blush gowns, the same color as Margaret's dress, creating a visual connection I was excluded from. I watched my daughter disappear into the bridal suite, knowing Margaret would be waiting to help her dress. The mother of the bride moment I had dreamed of was happening without me. Michael knocked softly at 5:45 p.m. Mrs. Bennet, the ceremony will begin in 15 minutes. Are you certain you wish to remain here? I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. He hesitated, then said, "The videographer, Alicia, asked me to give you this." He handed me a small tablet. "She's set up a private live stream for you. You'll be able to see close-ups of the ceremony." I took the tablet with trembling hands. "Thank you, Michael, for everything." He straightened his jacket. "It's not over yet, Mrs. Bennet. The reception still awaits." With a slight bow, he left me to watch my daughter's wedding from a distance. The ceremony was beautiful. Katie walked down the aisle on Dave's arm, looking so grown up, so happy, that despite everything, my heart swelled with love and pride. The vows were personal and touching. The string quartet played Pachelbel's Canon, my suggestion, one of the few that had been accepted. And then it was over. Mr. and Mrs. James Wilson walked back up the aisle while guests showered them with the lavender petals I had selected months ago. The wedding party moved to the lakeside terrace for photographs while the guests were directed to the ballroom for cocktails. I sat alone in my hidden room, watching it all unfold through windows and on Alicia's live stream. I had never felt so close yet so far from my daughter. It was during the reception that everything changed. I was still watching from my secluded spot when Michael appeared again, this time with determination in his eyes. "Mrs. Bennet, the father-daughter dance is about to begin. After that will be the toasts. If you wish to be recognized for your contribution, this would be the moment." I hesitated, torn between the desire for justice and the fear of ruining Katie's perfect day. "What do you suggest?" I asked finally. He straightened his bow tie. "Allow me to handle it, ma'am. No scenes, no confrontations, just the truth, presented with the appropriate respect." I studied his face, saw nothing but professional integrity there. "All right," I said at last. "But promise me one thing, don't hurt my daughter." I watched on the tablet as Dave led Katie onto the dance floor. They swayed to Butterfly Kisses, a song about a father's love for his daughter, a song that should have been meaningless to a man who had entered her life when she was 10 years old, who had never driven her to dance classes or checked for monsters under her bed. When the dance ended, guests applauded, and the DJ announced it was time for toasts. Margaret stood first, champagne in hand, beaming with maternal pride. "As Katie's mother," she began, and I felt bile rise in my throat. "I have had the privilege of watching her grow into the beautiful woman she is today." The speech continued, a masterpiece of appropriation, as Margaret took credit for raising my child, for guiding her through life's challenges, for creating the perfect wedding day. When she finished, there was enthusiastic applause. The best man spoke next, then the maid of honor. Just as it seemed the toasts were concluding, Michael stepped forward with a microphone. He hadn't told me this was part of the plan. My heart raced as he cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the staff here at Lakeview Resort, I would like to propose a special toast." The room quieted, guests turning toward this unexpected speaker. Michael's voice was clear and carried easily through the ballroom. It is customary in our establishment to acknowledge those whose generosity has made events like this possible. He paused, scanning the room. Today, we would like to express our appreciation to Mrs. Eleanor Bennett, the mother of the bride, whose contribution of $47,429 paid for every aspect of this beautiful celebration. The silence that followed was absolute. I could see faces turning, confused, looking for me. Margaret's expression transformed from confidence to horror. Katie, seated at the head table, froze with her champagne glass halfway to her lips. Michael continued, his tone pleasant but unyielding. From the $3,879 wedding dress to the $4,350 floral arrangements, from the $15,000 venue fee to the $7,500 photographer, Mrs. Bennett ensured that no expense was spared for her daughter's special day. He raised his water glass to Mrs. Bennett, whose love and generosity made today possible, even though she was not included on the guest list. Gasps rippled through the room. Katie's face had gone pale. Margaret was whispering furiously to Dave, and then something unexpected happened. James, the groom, stood up. "What do you mean, not on the guest list?" he demanded, looking directly at Michael. "Mrs. Bennett is absolutely invited. She's Katie's mother." Michael's expression remained neutral as he replied, "Sir, I have the final guest list here. Mrs. Bennett's name does not appear on it. However, Mr. and Mrs. Taylor are listed as parents of the bride." James turned to Katie, confusion evident on his face. "Katie, what's going on? You told me your mom was coming but might be late because of her business trip." All eyes were on my daughter now. She looked trapped, her gaze darting between her new husband and her aunt. She began, then stopped. Margaret stood, taking control as always. "This is inappropriate," she announced loudly. "This waiter has no right to discuss private family matters." But the damage was done. Guests were murmuring, connecting the dots. James was still staring at Katie, waiting for an answer, and in that moment, I decided it was time to stop hiding. I texted Michael, "I'm coming in." The side door to the ballroom opened, and I stepped through. The navy pantsuit had been a good choice. I looked dignified, professional, a stark contrast to Margaret's emotional fluster. The room fell silent again as I walked slowly toward the head table. Katie's eyes widened when she saw me. "Mom," she whispered, and in that one word, I heard confusion, shame, and just maybe a hint of relief. I stopped a few feet from the table, maintaining my composure with every ounce of strength I possessed. "Congratulations, Katie and James," I said, my voice steady despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. "You make a beautiful couple." James recovered first, stepping forward to embrace me. "Mrs. Bennett, I'm so glad you're here. There's been some kind of misunderstanding." Over his shoulder, I could see Margaret's face contorted with anger. Katie remained frozen in her seat. When James released me, I turned to address the room at large. "I apologize for the disruption. That wasn't my intention." My gaze found Michael, who nodded slightly. "However, since the matter has been raised, I think it's important to be honest. Yes, I financed this wedding. And no, I wasn't invited to attend." Murmurs swept through the crowd again. "But I'm here now," I continued, "not to cause problems, but because a mother should see her daughter on her wedding day, don't you think?" The challenge hung in the air. Katie finally stood, her wedding dress, the one I had paid for, rustling softly as she moved toward me. "Mom," she said again, tears welling in her eyes. I thought. She seemed unable to finish a thought. Margaret swooped in, placing herself between us. "Eleanor, this is hardly the time or place," she hissed. "You're ruining Katie's wedding." I met my sister's gaze calmly. "No, Margaret, you did that when you convinced my daughter to exclude me from one of the most important days of her life." I turned back to Katie. "I never needed to be the center of attention. I just wanted to be here, as your mother." James looked from Katie to Margaret, then back to me, pieces visibly falling into place. "You told me your mom was too busy with work to help with the planning," he said to Katie. "You said she was happy to pay but didn't want to be involved." Katie's silence was damning. Margaret attempted another intervention. "Katie was just trying to spare your feelings. Eleanor, we all know how work always came first for you." The accusation hung in the air, but this time, I didn't let it land. Work came first. I agreed, because someone had to pay the bills. Someone had to save for college, for this wedding, for the life Katie deserved. That someone was me, not you. Margaret. You were able to be the fun aunt precisely because I was working to provide everything else. A middle-aged woman I didn't recognize stood up from one of the tables. I'm confused, she said, looking directly at Katie. You told everyone your mother was too busy to attend your wedding, but she's here, and it sounds like she paid for everything. The woman turned to me. I'm Carol, James's aunt. Are you saying you weren't actually invited to your own daughter's wedding that you paid nearly $50,000 for? The blunt question, spoken loudly enough for everyone to hear, caused another ripple of shocked whispers. Katie's face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. It wasn't like that, she insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. James took Katie's hand, his expression serious. Katie, we need to talk about this. He glanced at the uncomfortable guests, then at me. Mrs. Bennet, I had no idea. I swear to you, I thought you were invited but might be late because of work. I believed him. The shock in his eyes was too genuine to be faked. I know, James, I assured him. This isn't your fault. My gaze shifted to Margaret, who was frantically whispering to Dave. The fault lies elsewhere. The reception had ground to a halt. The beautiful celebration I had financed was now overshadowed by the ugly truth. This wasn't what I wanted, not for Katie, not for James, not for myself. Taking a deep breath, I made one final decision. Please, I said, raising my voice to address the entire room. This is still a wedding reception. My daughter and her wonderful new husband deserve to celebrate their love. I turned to the DJ, who had been watching the drama unfold with wide eyes. The music, please, as the opening notes of a popular dance song filled the room. I looked back at Katie. We'll talk tomorrow, I told her quietly. Tonight is still yours. Then, with my head high, I walked back toward the side door. I had made my point. The truth was out. Now it was up to Katie to decide what happened next. Michael met me at the door, respect evident in his eyes. Mrs. Bennet, he murmured, would you like me to escort you out? I shook my head. Not yet. I'd like to watch a little longer. He nodded and led me back to the private room. Through the window, I could see the reception slowly, awkwardly resuming. Some guests were dancing, others clustered in small groups, undoubtedly discussing the scene they had just witnessed. Katie and James were in intense conversation at the edge of the dance floor. Margaret and Dave stood nearby, looking uncomfortable and defensive. I felt a complex mix of emotions. Vindication, yes, but also sadness and a strange sense of relief. The secret was out. The pretense was over. Whatever happened next would at least be based on truth. I watched for another hour as the reception continued. Eventually, Katie and James joined the dancing, though my daughter's smile seemed forced. Margaret avoided the dance floor entirely, sitting rigidly at a table with Dave and their children. Around 10 p.m., Michael knocked on my door again. Mrs. Bennet, most of the guests are departing. Would you like me to arrange for your car? I nodded, suddenly exhausted. Yes, thank you. As he turned to leave, I added, Michael, thank you for what you did tonight. It couldn't have been easy. He paused, his expression thoughtful. In my years of service, Mrs. Bennet, I've learned that families are complicated. Sometimes they need a little help seeing the truth. With a slight bow, he left to summon my car. As I gathered my things, preparing to leave, there was another knock at the door. When I opened it, I was shocked to find James standing there, still in his tuxedo, but with the tie loosened. Mrs. Bennet, he said, his voice low and urgent. I owe you an apology. I had no idea what was happening. I believed him. The distress in his eyes was too real to be feigned. Please don't apologize. James, I replied. This isn't your fault. He ran a hand through his hair, looking troubled. Katie's devastated, not because of what happened tonight, but because she realizes what she's done. She's been crying since you left the ballroom. My heart twisted at the image. Despite everything, I hated the thought of my daughter in pain. Where is she now? I asked. Still at the reception, he answered. She wants to see you, but she's afraid you won't forgive her. The pain I'd been carrying for months surged to the surface. I don't know if forgiveness is possible right now, I admitted, but we can start with honesty. James nodded, understanding in his eyes. That's fair. For what it's worth, I think Katie got caught between you and her aunt. Margaret can be persuasive. There was a diplomatic understatement. Will you at least talk to Katie before you leave? He asked. She's your daughter, and despite everything, she loves you. The simple statement broke something inside me. Tears welled in my eyes for the first time that day. I'll talk to her, I agreed. But not tonight. We're both too emotional, and this is still your wedding night. Tell her to call me tomorrow. James hesitated, then nodded. Okay, I'll tell her. He turned to leave, then stopped. Mrs. Bennet, thank you for the wedding. It was beautiful, even with everything else. I managed a small smile. You're welcome, James. Take care of my daughter. He promised he would, then disappeared back toward the ballroom. I waited another 15 minutes before Michael returned to escort me to my car. As we walked through the now quiet resort, he informed me that most guests had left, including Margaret and her family. The bride and groom will be departing shortly as well, he added. They've decided to continue with their honeymoon plans. I wasn't surprised canceling would have been complicated and costly. Besides, Katie and James deserved their honeymoon, regardless of the wedding drama. As Michael opened the car door for me, he handed me a small envelope. From all of us on the service staff, he explained. Inside was a simple card signed by the waiters, bartenders, and kitchen staff who had worked the event. Thank you for standing up for yourself with dignity, the message read. We witness many family dramas in this job, but rarely see such grace under pressure. The unexpected gesture brought fresh tears to my eyes. Please thank everyone for me, I told Michael as I slipped into the driver's seat. And take care, Michael, you're a good man. His smile was genuine. You as well, Mrs. Bennet. Drive safely. I spent that night in my empty house, surrounded by photos of Katie growing up. Katie at her 5th birthday party, gap-toothed and beaming. Katie at her high school graduation. Katie in her college dorm room. I thought about the accusations Margaret had made that I was absent. That work came first. There was some truth there. I had to admit. I had missed moments. I had sometimes chosen a client meeting over a school play, but I had also been there for the nightmares, the broken hearts, the college applications. I had worked myself to exhaustion to give Katie opportunities. Was that not love too? Different from Margaret's cookies and crafts approach, but love nonetheless. Deep, sacrificial love that had ultimately been dismissed as mere financial support. The next morning, Sunday, I woke early, made coffee, and waited for Katie's call. My phone remained silent until nearly noon, when it finally rang. I answered on the second ring. Hello, Katie. Her voice was small, rough, from crying. Mom, can I come over? Please, I need to talk to you. I agreed. And 40 minutes later, my doorbell rang. Katie stood on the porch in jeans and a sweatshirt, her eyes red-rimmed, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Gone was the radiant bride of yesterday, replaced by a young woman who looked like she hadn't slept. Come in, I said, stepping aside. She entered hesitantly, as if afraid I might change my mind. We sat in the living room, the coffee table between us like neutral territory. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, Katie broke the silence. I'm so sorry, Mom. I don't even know where to begin. I waited, giving her space to continue. She twisted her new wedding ring nervously. What happened yesterday, what Michael said, it was all true, wasn't it? You weren't invited to my wedding. It wasn't really a question, but I answered anyway. No, I wasn't. Margaret called the day before to tell me the ceremony was family only and suggested I take my business trip to Boston instead. Katie winced. I knew she called you, but I didn't know what she said exactly. She told me she explained that we were keeping it small and that you understood. I studied my daughter, seeing both the child I'd raised and the stranger she'd somehow become. Katie, be honest with me. Did you know I wasn't on the guest list? She couldn't meet my eyes. Not at first, she admitted quietly. When we started planning, I assumed you'd be there, but then Aunt Margaret kept saying things like, your mom is so busy, we shouldn't bother her with these details, and Eleanor would rather write a check than help with centerpieces. After a while, she trailed off, her shame evident. After a while, you started to believe her, I finished. Katie nodded miserably. She made it sound like you'd be relieved not to have to sit through a long ceremony, like you'd consider it a waste of your valuable time. And what about the father-daughter dance with Dave? The introduction of Margaret and Dave as your parents. Were those your ideas or hers? My tone was sharper than I intended, and Katie flinched. Hers, she whispered. She said since Dave had been more present in my life than any father figure, it made sense. And then she suggested that instead of a mother-daughter dance that might make you uncomfortable, we should just do a special toast from the people who raised me. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. I should have stood up to her. I should have insisted you be included. But she was so convincing, and you and I have been so distant lately, and She buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs. Despite my hurt, my anger, my sense of betrayal, I couldn't bear to see my child in such pain. I moved to sit beside her on the couch, placing a tentative hand on her back. Katie, I said softly, what Margaret did was manipulative and cruel. But you're an adult. You made choices too. She nodded without looking up. I know. That's why I can't stop crying. I let her convince me that you didn't really want to be there, that you were just financially supporting me out of obligation. She raised her tear-stained face to mine. But that's not true, is it? You wanted to be part of my wedding. It wasn't a question. But I answered anyway. Of course I did. You're my only child. I've loved you since before you took your first breath. Katie crumbled at my words, dissolving into fresh tears. I'm so sorry, Mom. I've been horrible, ungrateful, blind. She clutched my hand. James is furious with me. He had no idea what was happening. He thought you were invited but might be late because of work. When Michael revealed everything, she shuddered at the memory. James said he's never been so ashamed. He couldn't believe I would exclude my own mother who paid for everything. I squeezed her hand gently. What about your honeymoon? Aren't you supposed to be leaving today? Katie shook her head. We postponed it. James said we couldn't go celebrate while this was unresolved. He's right. We talked for hours that Sunday. Really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. Katie admitted that Margaret had been gradually driving a wedge between us since her childhood, with subtle comments and insinuations about my priorities. She would say things like, "It's too bad your mom couldn't make it, but I'm here," Katie explained. Or she'd point out all the school events you missed because of work, never acknowledging all the ones you did attend. I shared my perspective to how I'd worked so hard to provide the security my own mother had never given me, how Margaret's picture-perfect family life had always made me feel inadequate as a single mother. I thought giving you financial stability was my greatest gift, I admitted. I never realized it was being used to paint me as cold or distant. As afternoon turned to evening, Katie asked the question I'd been dreading. Can you ever forgive me? I took a deep breath, searching for the most honest answer. I don't know yet, I told her. What happened hurt deeply. Being excluded from your wedding. Watching Margaret take my place, those wounds won't heal overnight. Katie nodded, accepting my answer even as fresh tears spilled. I understand, but I want to try to make it right. Somehow, I studied my daughter's face, seeing genuine remorse there. It will take time, I said finally. And we'll need to establish some boundaries with Margaret. At the mention of my sister, Katie's expression hardened. I don't want to see her for a while. What she did manipulating me against you, it was so wrong. As Katie prepared to leave, she paused at the front door. James and I were thinking, maybe when we get back from our honeymoon, we could have a small ceremony. Just us, a justice of the peace, and you, a do-over of sorts. The gesture touched me deeply. I'd like that, I said, my voice thick with emotion. She hugged me then, fiercely, like she had as a little girl. I love you, Mom. I'm going to fix this, I promise. I held her tight, breathing in the scent of her hair. I love you too, Kate girl. We'll figure it out. As I watched her drive away, I felt a fragile hope taking root. We had a long road ahead, but at least now we were walking it together, eyes open to the manipulation that had nearly destroyed us. The next day, Margaret showed up unannounced at my office. Barbara tried to turn her away, but my sister pushed past her, barging into my private conference room where I was meeting with clients. We need to talk, Eleanor, she announced, ignoring the startled executives around the table. I maintained my composure, apologizing to my clients and asking for a brief recess. Once we were alone, Margaret launched into her defense. That stunt you pulled at the wedding was unforgivable, she began, her voice shaking with anger. You embarrassed Katie. In front of everyone, you made her special day all about you. I regarded my sister calmly, seeing her clearly, perhaps for the first time in our adult lives. No, Margaret, that's what you did, for years. Her face flushed. What are you talking about? I've been there for Katie when you weren't. I've supported her, guided her. I cut her off. You manipulated her. You deliberately drove a wedge between us. You convinced my daughter to exclude me from her wedding while happily accepting my money. Margaret's expression shifted, defensiveness giving way to a flash of guilt before hardening again. Katie needed a mother figure who was actually present. If that was me instead of you, that's not my fault. The old accusation that I had been an absent mother struck a nerve, but I refused to be baited. I worked to give Katie opportunities, including the lavish wedding you helped her plan without me. That was my choice as her mother. What was your excuse for systematically turning my child against me? For a moment, Margaret seemed at a loss for words. Then her chin lifted defiantly. Katie came to me. She chose me. Maybe you should ask yourself why. The statement was designed to hurt, to make me question my mothering. In the past, it might have worked. Not anymore. Katie was manipulated by someone she trusted. I replied steadily. That's not choice, Margaret. That's exploitation. My sister flinched as if I'd slapped her. You've always been jealous of my relationship with Katie, she accused. Just because you couldn't balance work and motherhood doesn't mean. I raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. This conversation is over, Margaret. Katie knows the truth now. James knows the truth. Everyone who attended that wedding knows the truth. You can't manipulate the narrative anymore. Margaret's face contorted with fury and something else, fear, perhaps, at losing her control over the situation. Katie will forgive me, she insisted. She always does. Our bond is stronger than this. I stood up, signaling that our meeting was concluded. Maybe, that's between you and her, but things will never be the same, and you know it. My sister gathered her purse, desperation replacing anger in her eyes. Eleanor, please, we're family. We can work this out. The plea surprised me. Margaret rarely showed vulnerability. Family doesn't do what you did, I replied quietly. When you're ready to acknowledge the damage you've caused and make genuine amends, we can talk. Until then, I have nothing more to say to you. I opened the door, gesturing for her to leave. With one last wounded look, she departed, her shoulders slumped in defeat. The weeks that followed were a period of painful but necessary healing. Katie and James postponed their honeymoon, choosing instead to focus on addressing the wedding fallout. They sent personal apologies to each guest, explaining that there had been a family misunderstanding that was now being resolved. Katie called me every day, sometimes just to check in, other times for longer conversations about our history and relationship. We began the slow process of rebuilding trust, one honest conversation at a time. As for Margaret, Katie informed me that she had established firm boundaries, including a temporary no-contact period. I need time to sort out how I feel, she explained. James says I was in something called a triangulated relationship where Margaret was manipulating both of us. He found a family therapist who specializes in this kind of thing. 1 month after the wedding, Katie and James finally left for their honeymoon, a 2-week trip to Italy that I had also helped finance. Before they departed, we had the small, private ceremony they had suggested. Just the three of us, a justice of the peace, and Michael from the resort, whom Katie had specifically asked to witness the moment. In a simple white dress, not the elaborate gown from the first wedding, Katie renewed her vows with James. This time, I was officially recognized as mother of the bride. I stood beside my daughter, holding a small bouquet of white peonies, the same flowers from the original ceremony, but this time given to me with love and recognition. When they returned from Italy, Katie and I established a new tradition: Sunday dinners. Just the two of us, sometimes with James, where we could continue strengthening our relationship. During one such dinner in late August, Katie shared that she had finally spoken with Margaret. She still doesn't fully understand what she did wrong, Katie said, pushing pasta around her plate. She keeps saying she was just trying to protect me, that she was giving me the mother figure she thought I needed. I nodded, unsurprised. Margaret has always been good at justifying her actions, even to herself. Katie looked up, her expression serious. The thing is, Mom, I don't need her to be my mother figure. I have a mother. Maybe we've had our struggles, but you've always been there in the ways that truly mattered. The simple acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes. Thank you for seeing that now, I said softly. 6 months after the wedding, life had found a new rhythm. Katie and James bought their first home without financial assistance from me, at their insistence. We need to stand on our own, James explained. It's important to Katie. I respected their decision, recognizing it as part of Katie's journey toward healthier relationships. My relationship with Margaret remained distant but civil. We saw each other at family gatherings but maintained careful boundaries. She had apologized, eventually, though her words carried an undercurrent of justification rather than true remorse. Still, it was a start. The experience had taught me valuable lessons about speaking up sooner, about not allowing hurt to fester until it became unbearable. I had learned to advocate for myself, to demand the respect and recognition I deserved. Last week, Katie called with news that gave our story its final, beautiful twist. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "I'm pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother." Joy surged through me, pure and overwhelming. "Oh, Katie, that's wonderful." As we talked about due dates and doctor's appointments, Katie grew serious. "Mom, I want you to know something. When this baby comes, you won't have to compete for your place in their life. You'll be their grandmother, their only grandmother on my side." No confusion, no manipulation, no divided loyalty. The promise touched me deeply. Katie continued, her voice firm, "And I'm going to tell them about how their grandmother worked so hard to give their mom every opportunity, how love sometimes looks like sacrifice and long hours and college funds, how there are many ways to show love, and they're all valid and beautiful." As I sit here today, reflecting on the painful journey that brought us to this moment of healing, I understand something profound. Family relationships are never perfect, but they should always be honest. The truth can be devastating, as it was when it came out at Katie's wedding, but it can also be cleansing, opening the way for genuine connection. If you're listening to my story and recognizing patterns in your own family, the subtle manipulations, the wedges driven between loved ones, know that it's never too late for honesty. It's never too late to reclaim your rightful place, to insist on being seen and valued for who you are and what you've contributed. What would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed silent and accepted exclusion from one of life's most important moments? Or would you have found the courage to stand up, as I finally did, and say, "I deserve to be here"? If my story resonates with you, share it with someone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Sometimes all we need is to know we're not alone, that others have walked this difficult path and found healing on the other side. I'm recording this from my home office, the same place where I worked all those long hours to give my daughter the life I thought she deserved. But now I understand that what she truly deserved, what we both deserved, was honesty, recognition, and the space to love each other exactly as we are. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe if this story touched you, and remember, the truth may hurt, but silence hurts longer.